Hey everybody, it's Kennedy from the MCM team. We are going to do another one of our Hero Pack primers, this time talking all about Gambit and Gambit's Hero Kit. So Gambit is one of the more recent heroes of Marvel Champions. In fact, he came out the same day as Rogue. That was the most recent Marvel Champions release. So we're kind of approaching the timeline from both ends. We just did Miss Marvel, and now we're on Gambit, and we're going to slowly meet somewhere in the middle. Now the reason we're doing the newest Hero Packs the soonest is my local game store has agreed to donate a Hero Pack from each release that I can give away through the YouTube channel. So if you would like to get a copy of Gambit, all you have to do is tell me in the comments below what your favorite aspect is with Gambit and why. What card do you like to play from that aspect with Gambit, so other players can read about different strategies to play with Gambit, because that is the goal of these videos. So if you do that by next week, so this video is going live on the 14th. That is by the 21st. I'll be picking one of the random commenters to receive a copy of Gambit. So thanks a lot to my local game shop, and thanks for tuning in to this video. So let's get underway talking all about Gambit. And let's start with our identity cards. So we have Remy LeBeau, which was actually the name of one of my college professors, and I was pretty much obsessed with him because his name was Remy LeBeau, but that's beside the point. He has an amazing 3 recover with the Mutant and Thief trait on his alter ego side, and Thief Extraordinaire, action thwart. So a thwart in alter ego that isn't a bad thwart like She-Hulk. This is pretty cool. Exhaust Remy LeBeau and look at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck. Discard one of those cards. So you will have to exhaust and discard a card from the top of the encounter deck. Remove threat from a scheme equal to the number of boost icons discarded on that card. That's really strong. So you can get rid of the 3 boost icon card and leave the 1 boost icon or 0 boost icon card there. You're also gaining encounter deck knowledge. You're getting to know what's on top of the encounter deck. We thought Spider-Woman was good at that. Remy LeBeau Gambit is even better. This lets you sit in alter ego form and avoid really nasty schemes. It also lets you queue up protection, defend but take no damage defenses in solo. It's just as powerful in multiplayer. Well, maybe not just as powerful. It's probably a little bit less powerful in multiplayer, because in multiplayer, let's say you have 2 players, you're now seeing 4 cards during the villain phase, 2 boost cards and 2 encounter cards. So Gambit gives you a quarter, 25% of the knowledge of the villain phase. In solo, you are removing threat from the scheme and then seeing 1 card, so you're seeing 50% of the villain phase. And that's going to get even worse as you get to more players. So I said it's just as good. That was totally a misspeaking. It's not nearly as good in multiplayer as it is in solo, but it is still an incredibly strong ability. In our hero form, we have 1 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 defense. So that's something to note right away. We are a lot better at thwarting in alter ego than we are in hero form, which is kind of good because you're, making up for your penance of flipping to alter ego form by having good thwart abilities there. We have 2 abilities here, charge decard. So charge decard is an action, place 1 charge counter here, limit once per round. So you can only place charge counters there that way once per round. So that's going to be important to remember. And then throw decard, interrupt. When you play an attack event, remove up to 3 charge counters from here. That event deals +1 damage for each counter removed that way. Or for each counter removed. We've never had a card phrased with this +1 damage, but I'm treating it as this event deals 1 additional damage for each counter removed this way. So this is very similar to aggressive energy, slightly different than warrior skill, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. So what's the main hook from Gambit? It's just about everything. Gambit, like a lot of the modern heroes, does just about everything really, really well. He's got amazing alter ego shenanigans. Some of the best alter ego abilities in the game are in Gambit's kit. Between Thief Extraordinaire and Creole Charmer, we're in really good shape. We've got this attack boosting gimmick with charge to card and throw to card, and it's not limited to his signature abilities. So you can charge, your uppercut or whatever else, your haymakers from aspect and basic cards. So lots of deck building hooks there. And then big defense. Gambit has a big, sturdy 3 defense. And as we learned with Spider-Man, 3 defense can get you a long ways to go. And while we don't have backflip, we have natural agility instead. Natural agility often feels like a backflip for when you defend. And we'll get into that more later, but you've got, 3 different hooks between alter ego, between attack charging, and between defense. So you might be thinking, hey, I've heard you talk about Valkyrie before, KennedyHawk, and I know what you think about how her having 3 different hooks does. It splits her kit, makes her kind of unwieldy. That is not the case with Gambit, because each of the kits is insular, but the other kits can be secondary to it without causing a huge problem by having to move Deathglow or anything like that. They're not usually competing with one another, they're additive, which is a really strong design mechanic that the designers have nailed with Gambit. All right, so key cards. Like I said, you have a split kit here again, so it really depends. If you want to be an attacker, your key cards are going to be Royal Flush and Charged Card. If you want to be a thwarter, your key card is going to be Creole Charmer. And if you want to be a defender, your key card is going to be Natural Agility. But honestly, you're probably going to play all of these events throughout the game. So I thought we'd just go through every card in Gambit's kit a little bit slower so that we can talk through them all and talk about different situations where you might use them. So Royal Flush, let's start with that. It's an attack superpower, point for deft focus. Hero action attack, place 1 charge counter on Gambit. Deal 0 damage to an enemy, deal 0 damage to an enemy, deal 0 damage to an enemy. One of the players I was playing with drew this card and he was like, wow, this card is trash. But I'm here to tell you, it is not. With different attack boosting abilities, including spending your charge counters, you can get this up to 5 to 6 damage 3 times, which is crazy value. So we will talk a little bit about the timing here in a minute, but basically the timing on Gambit's ability is an interrupt. So you would have to remove the charge counters before resolving the hero action from Royal Flush. So the charge counter you're placing on Gambit can't be used to boost those damage abilities, but it sort of refunds whatever you are spending. Charged card. This is probably my favorite card in his kit. It gets overlooked a lot. It's a 2-cost event that's just deal 4 damage to an enemy. So a good Haymaker. Reasonable Haymaker. It's a Miss Marvel card. But there's a bunch of other text. For this attack, if Gambit's Throaty Card ability removed at least 1 counter, this attack gains ranged. 2 counters, this attack also gains piercing. 3 counters, this attack also gains overkill. So if you spend 3 counters, this does 7 damage with ranged piercing and overkill. So you can ignore, retaliate, you can pierce through tough, and still push damage onto the villain. That's amazing. You are spending 3 counters, and just like War Machine and Groot before him, this is a counter-based hero. The amount of fun you get to have with Gambit is going to depend on how you spend your charge counters. So you have this secondary economy that you have to worry about. So you have to think about, do I really need the overkill now versus the piercing and ranged? Is it better off as just a 2 for 4, get rid of a minion attack? What should I be doing? Next we have Charmer. 2-cost event that's a thwart alter ego action. So this is important, alter ego action. You cannot play this in hero form. So if you need to be thwarting with Gambit, you're going to have a real hard time in hero form because his signature event is alter ego form only. His exhaust ability on his alter ego is alter ego form only. And his thwart is 1. So you're going to have a hard time without aspect cards getting rid of a lot of threat without flipping down. But this makes up for it. 2 costs for removing 3 threat from a scheme. Again, it's a Miss Marvel card, but with extra abilities, because why not? We're Gambit. If this removes the last threat from a scheme, confuse the villain. That's amazing. So right here we see Gambit has a ton of hooks that build into aspects. He's got like the overkill excess damage aspect hook with charged card. He's got that remove the last threat from a scheme, thing going for him with Charmer to go with Justice. And don't worry, we're not done yet. We have Natural Agility. It's a 0-cost defense superpower, Hero Interrupt. When you defend against an attack, place 1 charge counter on Gambit. Now that's part of the cost, so you are going to gain that charge counter before resolving what's after the arrow. For each charge counter on Gambit, you get +1 defense for that attack. So that means if you use your base defense of 3 and you had 2 charge counters, you're going to go up to 3 more charge counters and now have a base defense of 6. That's bonkers, right? This is real good value. Mainly used on your base defenses. There aren't a lot of other reasons to use it. You could trigger it off of any defense events just to get the charge counter, but you're probably better off base defending if you're going to do that. So 9 events. Very event-heavy hero. Let's see what else we've got. We've got 4 one-of cards and a 2 of resource. I love resource heroes, so this is going to be good. We've got Rogue. Reduce the cost to play Rogue by 1 for each charge counter on your identity. Toughness, 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 health. With the X-Men trait, which is very strong. This is an amazing signature ally, right? We know how strong Winter Soldier is, Art beside us, just from that cost reduction. If you can get a 0-cost 2 thwart body with toughness, you can block an attack, thwart for 4, block another attack. That's like huge value. So you are going to want to get to 4 charge counters and play Rogue for free, basically. We have Gambit's Guild Armor, which is unique. After Gambit defends against an enemy and takes no damage, exhaust Gambit's Guild Armor to ready Gambit. So again, this is very similar to Black Widow's Synth Suit. And again, it's another hook directly into one of the hooks for protection. So you've now got 3 aspects with direct hooks just from his kit. without even thinking about it, right? So this is like a desperate defense, but on an upgrade that you get to use every turn, but without the +2 defense. So, I mean, it's fair-ish. It's a really good card. You're going to want to play it as soon as you see it, because it allows you to ignore a part of the villain phase for the most part. Especially because you can look at the top card of the villain deck, flip up, defend, and know you're going to trigger guild armor, so that you still get to use your ability on the next turn. Next, we have Gambit Staff. Item, weapon, so good for mean swinging. When an enemy attacks, exhaust Gambit Staff. Deal 1 damage to that enemy. So, if you're in hero form, the villain is probably going to attack you, so that's 1 free damage a turn. If you're playing against Ultron, you know what dies before it hits you? Ultron drones. This card is also amazing. It doesn't seem like that consequential, but the 1 damage that builds up over time will make or break your game. Next, we have the Thieves Guild, which is Gambit's alter ego support. Finally, not an apartment. We are all super happy about that. Alter ego response. After you resolve your Thief Extraordinaire ability, exhaust the Thieves Guild. Remove 1 threat from a scheme. If this removes the last threat from that scheme, draw a card. I love this. I really like this alter ego support that plays into the hero's like special ability. I think that is a super cool way for you to be encouraged to engage with the hookup a hero, and it makes it one of my favorite cards in Gambit's kit. And then we have 2 copies of a hero-specific resource, Hero Interrupt. When you spend this card, place 1 charge counter on Gambit. Pretty sweet. Again, this isn't going to combo well with Rogue because of timing, and we'll get to that in a minute. So our overall weaknesses and strengths. I really struggled here with weaknesses. I mean, his art is pretty cool instead of like amazingly cool, but that's pretty weak weakness. He does have a split kit ultimately, right? It's still unclear because he's very strong, and his split kit is additive. By deciding to defend with natural agility, you're not removing counters, so you now can't boost attacks. By flipping down with Charmer, you're not like having to spend your counters or miss out on counters, because you can still flip up and use that action each turn to create counters. So his kit doesn't have these like anti-synergies like Valkyrie did, where you have this choice of, do I put Deathglow on the villain or a minion? It turns off a bunch of cards or turns on a bunch of cards depending on however I make the wrong decision, because inevitably I will. Here, every decision you make only helps the other parts of the kit. So I listed split kit here under weaknesses, but really it's not a weakness. It's a weak one. Thwart is form dependent. I'll just say that. So if we do have to pick a weakness for Gambit, it's thwarting. That sounds ridiculous because he has Confuse in his kit, a built-in thwart, so you don't have to find events to thwart. And he's a thief/spy. You'd think he'd be great at thwarting. But with only 1 thwart in hero form and no in-kit ways to thwart while you're in hero form, you're going to be paying to flip to alter ego in order to thwart. So luckily you have all that good alter ego thwart to go along with it, but it kind of like counterbalances the goodness you can get from it. Yeah, you can remove 3 threat and you can confuse the villain, but you're going to immediately eat up that confuse. It's not like Black Widow, who can remove 4 threat and confuse in either form and sit in hero form and save that for an advance. Strengths with Gambit, he's super combo driven, strong in-kit events and good hooks into all the aspects except leadership, and maybe we'll get there. We'll see. I think he has the best alter ego hooks in the game. Flipping is my favorite thing to do, and Gambit enables that more than any other hero I've seen. Maybe Spider-Woman, but she doesn't have as much incentive to do so outside of her apartment, which we know apartment's boring and bland. On top of that, Gambit's really good at survivability, which can help in higher difficulty modes when you see spikes in damage. Alright, so let's get to some strategy nuance and talk about Throw card. So this is not the first time we've had a card that boosts damage from an event. So we also have Aggressive Energy, which is Hero Interrupt. When you spend this card to play an attack event, that event deals 1 additional damage. And we have Warrior Skill, which is a 3 uses support. When your hero attacks, remove 1 warrior counter from here. That attack deals 1 additional damage. The bottom line is this nuance doesn't matter to Gambit, but it can throw players for a loop. So I wanted to go over it. When Aggression Energy came out, there was a big deal about the difference in wording between Aggression Energy and Warrior Skill, the difference with Embiggen from Miss Marvel, and all sorts of like technicalities with wording. Basically, some attack events, like Royal Flush and Melee, have multiple sources of damage, but they are not multiple attacks. So Royal Flush is placed when charge counter on Gambit deals 0 damage to an enemy, 0 damage to an enemy, 0 damage to an enemy. That is all one attack. So if you use a charge counter on Royal Flush, you're going to deal 1, 1, and 1. Melee is very similar. Deal 3 damage to an enemy, deal 3 damage to an enemy. So again, one charge counter on Melee will do 4 and 4. Or 1 by 1 would do 3, and then defeat another enemy and do 3. There are some events, and I think there's only like 2 or 3 of them, that make multiple attacks. An example of that is Dance of Death from Black Widow, who we made lots of comparisons to. So here, this hero action says, make the following 3 attacks in order. Deal 1 damage to an enemy, deal 2 damage to an enemy, and then deal 3 damage to an enemy. So if you could somehow use Charge to Card on Dance of Death, you would get to do 2, 3, and then 4, because Charge to Card increases the damage from the event. Likewise with aggressive energy, which you could use with Black Widow. Warrior skill only increases the damage from a single attack. So since Dance of Death divvies its damage up as 3 separate attacks, Warrior skill would only be able to impact one of those. We don't yet, that I've seen, have any aspect cards that provide multiple attacks, just multiple sources of damage from a single attack. So Charge to Card and Throw to Card are going to work with all of the aspect attacks you could think of, but be careful in the future looking for things like Dance of Death. Videos are forever, right? All right, and on timing. Timing is one of the unfortunate things with Gambit. So we already mentioned if you use molecular acceleration to pay for Royal Flush, you're having to pay all costs simultaneously. I've been playing it where the charge counter I get from molecular acceleration can then not be used for Royal Flush. People might have different opinions on that. I think that for sure we know that the charge counter placed from Royal Flush cannot be used to then charge Royal Flush, because that hero interrupt has to happen when you play an attack event, which is like before you play the costs. Again, that's the reason I think that molecular acceleration works the same way. The cost for Rogue is defined, and then you start paying the costs. So gaining a charge counter mid-cost payment doesn't let you go back and apply a new cost reduction. So got to be a little bit careful with timings, but overall they just read the cards and do what they say for the most part. All right, into my favorite part, deck building, Aspect Primer. As you can see, I want a little bit overkill with aggression, and I would have liked to put more things here. So a lot of these you're going to notice are very similar to Ms. Marvel. A lot of his events are basically Ms. Marvel events with extra abilities, so it makes sense. We've got 1 by 1. Obviously, you can boost both instances of the damage. Same thing with Melee. We talked about Warrior skill and aggressive energy. It just goes into this idea of multi-damage attack events. I think Gambit can be really useful with things that do excess damage. So using follow-throughs with Relentless Assault or Into the Fray, you can charge those attack events so that you get extra benefit from their secondary effect. I think he works okay with Honed Technique. The main problem is that his double resource doesn't have a mental in it, so you won't be able to trigger that on charged card if you're paying with his double resource. Your mileage may vary. I think Honed can still be super fun. I think he's great with No Quarter, right? No Quarter requires a physical resource, so you can use his hero-specific resource. Deal 4 damage to an enemy. For each point of excess damage, discard the top card of your deck and add each aggression card discarded this way to your hand. So you can turn your charge counters into card draw, and I love card draw. So, really good. Justice. You'd think there would be a ton of hooks for Justice, and there are. There's a lot of cards that, when you remove the last threat, do blah, 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 blah. But a lot of those are on hero-only events. And both of the remove the last threat things in Gambit's kit are alter ego actions. So you can still kind of build a deck that's built around keeping like a very low threat on schemes and side schemes and then defeating them. But for the most part, Justice is going to work great with Gambit because he likes to flip. So things like Sonic Rifle, really, really good. Lay Down the Law, I think, is great. I mean, it is going to be a little bit draw dependent. You got to draw it at the right time, right? But still pretty good. I really like Global Logistics with Gambit because it lets you look at the top 4 cards of the encounter deck, rearrange them to set up your Thief Extraordinaire so that you get optimal threat removal out of it. Likewise, I like Quake because you're jumping down a lot, so she can take care of minions for you. And obviously, you can boost Stealth Strike to make sure you defeat minions to get to remove that threat. All right, Protection. I think there's a lot of great hooks in Protection. I didn't list them all here. Obviously, the entire Defend and Take No Damage package, Unflappable, Desperate Defense, all of that. I put Never Back Down because I think it's the strongest one in that package. When you defend against an attack, you get +2 for the attack. If you take no damage, stun the attacking enemy, so you can eliminate 2 activations in once, especially in multiplayer with Gambit. I think Protection has a pretty awesome slew of attack events now, right? I was looking at Justice, and it just didn't have it. You could try boosting Turn the Tide or something cute like that with Justice. But with Protection, I think you really get a good set of options. So first hit, obviously, you can charge this up and defeat minions before they hit you. Hard knocks, make sure you're getting tough. I actually really like, this is awkward, but Gambit with Fighting Fit, because you have access to X Mansion, so you can keep healing Gambit to full. You can recover while you're flipping down, right flip down, remove some threat, recover the next turn, flip up, and now with 3 charge counters, Fighting Fit can be 8 damage for 2 costs. So between Charge to Card and Fighting Fit, you have all these 8 and 7 damage sources to throw at the villain. You can play with Preemptive Strike and some of those boost card canceling cards. So when you Thief Extraordinaire, you can say, okay, well, I don't need to remove too much threat, so I'll just use the 1 boost to remove threat. I'll put the 3 on top of the villain deck because I'm going to flip up and I'm going to Preemptive Strike to like really take it to the villain's face. Not an attack event, though, so you can't boost it. And Brother Voodoo, right? Go find the good Gambit events that exist because they are really, really good. And then Leadership. There aren't actually a lot of Leadership decks for Gambit on Marvel CDB. And we'll get to that in a minute because I think there should be more. But Leadership obviously has card draw, right? Kalu, White Tiger, Maria Hill, staple good things for every hero. As far as specifically with Gambit, I think Clarity Purpose can be pretty good because you'll be able to flip down and heal up whatever damage you use as a resource. I think Go All Out could be pretty good with Gambit. It works with his hero-specific resource because it requires a Lightning Bolt. Exhaust your hero and deal damage to an enemy equal to the combination of your hero's thwart, attack, and defense. So since you're a 1-2-3 hero, right away that's a 2-for-6 attack that also requires you to exhaust your hero. If you play a Moxie while you're flipping up, that can be a 2-for-9 damage attack. Pretty bonkers, right? 2-for-9, we like that a lot. And X-Men have the innate ability to use Utopia to get this like recurring readying going on their hero. So you can flip up, you can play Moxie, you can go all out, you can ready your hero by playing an ally and building board presence, and then either go all out again, or punch, or combo into a mass attack. All sorts of fun things that you could be done in Leadership with Gambit. We're just waiting for somebody to do it. All right, and then the basics. I think assess the situation to get to your combo pieces faster, right? That always works with combo heroes. Within Gambit's pack himself, he comes with a Professor X, obviously Confusion, good for flipping down. X Mansion, great for healing. And then Mutant Education, I think, is one of the strongest cards with Gambit. Alter Ego Action, choose up to 2 identity-specific cards in your discard pile. Shuffle them into your deck. If X Mansion is in play, draw a card. So it replaces itself, and it gives you your good Gambit cards back. From Rogue, we have X Gene, which is play only if your identity has the mutant trait. Max 1 per player, resource, exhaust X Gene, generate a wild resource for an identity-specific event. Sounds great. You've got a lot of them. And then Utopia. This is the one that I think works really well with Gambit. Or just all mutants in general. But if you're going to go that Leadership route, if each of your allies has the X-Men trait, increase your ally limit by 1, blah, 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 we don't care. Response, after an X-Men ally enters play, exhaust Utopia, ready an X-Men character you control. So you can be building bodies while readying Gambit and using his stats over and over again. So you can use his 3 to defend. He could use his armor to ready and defend for another player. Then you could still ready him to do your 2 attack, which is pretty bonkers. All right, so on theme for Gambit. Gambit's been around in the comics since the 1990s, and he's always been known for his allegiance or lack thereof to the X-Men, whether he's being a traitor to them or going and doing some sort of side hustle that might not really help the team, but kind of helps the team. Very, very thematic to how he works in his kit. His alter ego ability is well represented in the comics, and his card charging ability is a classic move. I am a huge Gambit fan from back in the day. I read that original Gambit run, which was like a 3-part or 4-part series, and then the one with the new son, which, spoilers, I won't tell you who the new son is, but has to do with Gambit, and it's from a Gambit solo series. No references to his solo runs other than like the fact that there's a Thieves Guild. A little bit disappointing. Does have Belladonna as his nemesis, so I give that major props. But overall, he is the iconic classic version of Gambit you would expect from the 90s. So no complaints from me there. And on to our patented archery scale. So going through things, remember we have power level, decision making, aspect, viability. So how viable are they on all 4 aspects, thematics, and fun factor. So power level right away, 5. Gambit is one of the strongest X-Men characters we have seen, if not the strongest. And this is, without a doubt, in my opinion, the strongest wave we have seen of Marvel Champions. Cyclops is definitely an A to S tier hero. Shadowcat, same thing. Storm is ridiculous with her damage potential. She can just one-shot villains turn 1 by drawing a card. Wolverine feels almost the same. Gambit is right up there with the leaders of those pack, in my opinion. So really, really strong hero, good survivability, good ability to shore up his weakness of needing to flip without even having to build into it, which makes him a strong character. Decision making, I'm giving him a 5 again, right? This is probably, in my opinion, the best designed counter character we have, right? With Groot, they completely remove the decision from you for the most part. There's a couple ways you can use his growth counters for his ability upgrades, but for the most part, like the forced interrupt just takes that power from you. War Machine with his Bang Bang Bucks, right? Since you lose them when flipping down, you're encouraged to just dump them, right? Get rid of them. With Gambit, that power is with the player, and I love that. It makes Gambit super engaging and fun and have lots of decisions. Aspect viability, I put him at a 4. I almost put him at a 5. I think leadership's not quite there yet for him. I mean, generic leadership is generically good, but it's not Gambit good. It's not Gambit's gumbo, right? So I think if we get more leadership attack or we get more X-Men support to really build that like stat pumping and readying Gambit build, we could have a pretty good day. In multiplayer, if you can get a honorary Avenger placed on Gambit and then use 3 honorary Avengers and Utopia to try to get multiple untaps per turn, you can build a pretty good stat building build. But it's like multiplayer and requires multi-deck building, so it downgrades it to a 4 for me. I think it's missing one aspect hook. Thematics 5.0. This is probably one of the most thematic characters out there for me. He's up there with Iron Man, right? When I demo people the game now, or like show them like a couple, like we play a game and then I show them some cool heroes, I'm going to be showing them Gambit because everyone, at least that I know, has seen the 90s X-Men show. They all remember what Gambit was like back in the day, and they look through his cards and they say, yep, that is a Marvel character that I remember, and it acts exactly like them. So Thematics 5.0. And for me, fun factor, way through the roof. I'm a huge Gambit fan. Top 5 to 10 character for me. Probably top 5, honestly. Definitely the peak of this wave between Gambit and Storm are 2 of my favorite characters. So that gives us an average of 4.8. Let's see where it stacks up against the field of the hero primer videos we've done. So again, we've gotten through the core set, Captain America, Miss Marvel. We did a random Colossus video in there, and now we're back at the more modern heroes and working our way back with Gambit at a 4.8. So he scored up with Captain America and Iron Man as 2 of, in my opinion, the best designed, best well-rounded, best awesome heroes in the game of Marvel Champions. So let me know what you think about Gambit. Remember, if you can put what your favorite aspect to play with Gambit is in the comments below and what cards make you want to play Gambit with that aspect, you will be entered into a contest to win a free hero pack of Gambit potentially next week. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day and go thwart some villains.